His name is Bernard, a black shoe shiner. Despite his young age, he possesses an excellent business wisdom. He deliberately sets up his stall in front of a bank, targeting wealthy white customers, and takes his time shining shoes to eavesdrop on their financial conversations. Bernard is not interested in earning much money from shining shoes. Instead, he writes down valuable financial secrets he hears from his clients in a notebook, demonstrating his true ambition lies in acquiring knowledge. Even at a young age, he knew that he wanted to be a banker, but this was Texas in 1939, where severe discrimination against black people made it seem like an impossible dream. Despite his father's discouragement, Bernard remained determined. After 15 years, he moved with his wife, Eunice, and their children to Los Angeles, where the racial discrimination was less severe. Although they were forced to live in a rundown utility room belonging to one of their relatives, Bernard remained optimistic and promised his wife they would find a new home soon. He began working as a real estate agent, scouring the city for houses to sell. By observing his surroundings, he notices that the black community in Los Angeles is packed, whereas the white community has many vacant houses. Although black people have both rental needs and financial means, there is no market for them. This presents a fantastic business opportunity for real estate speculation and renting. He spots an apartment owned by a white person with weeds growing in front of the door, indicating its poor condition. Despite this, he recognizes the apartment's strategic location adjacent to the black area. He approaches the owner and offers to buy the apartment for $30,000, promising to pay another $5,000 once all the rooms are rented out. Despite being impressed by Bernard's ideas, the owner of the apartment is unwilling to take any risks. Bernard understands the owner's concerns and bids him farewell. However, before leaving, he catches a glimpse of the owner's calendar, which was given to him by a local bank manager. This inspires an idea in Bernard's mind, so he heads straight to the bank in search of the manager. Unfortunately, the manager's secretary, who is prejudiced against black people, refuses to introduce Bernard to the manager. Undeterred, Bernard waits outside the bank for several hours until the manager finally emerges. He approaches the manager and mentions that he knows one of his VIP customers, and that his business proposal would be beneficial to him. Bernard then requests a loan, but the bank manager quickly rejects his proposal without much consideration. Later that evening, the owner calls Bernard and inquires if he had used his name to apply for a loan. Bernard has no option but to apologize for his actions. To his surprise, the owner does not reprimand him but instead praises his tenacity and determination in pursuing his goal. The owner then agrees to act as a guarantor for Bernard's loan application, which enables him to secure his first ever loan from the bank and purchase the property. Later that evening, Bernard returns to the building and encounters the same old lady from before. She orders him to leave, believing that he is still a renovation worker, but Bernard calmly informs her that he is the new owner. The old lady is stunned by this revelation, and a few days later, she moves out in anger because she refuses to live in the same building as black people. Once she leaves, Bernard rents out her apartment to a black woman. As expected, Bernard's prediction of a huge black tenant market comes true and the building is quickly filled. Bernard pays the negotiated follow-up payment to the former owner and impresses him with his business acumen. The former owner offers to partner with Bernard in a business venture, where Bernard selects the properties and calculates the income, while the former owner handles the negotiations and signs the contracts. With the former owner as the public face, they are able to hide the fact that they are doing business with a black man and split the profits. The partnership goes smoothly and they quickly make a substantial amount of money. Bernard's success continues as he moves his family from an apartment building to a mansion, providing them with a happy life. He believes in the wisdom of not retaliating when someone discriminates against him, as it would only put him in their game, and he prefers to play by his own rules, which are based on rational economics and maximizing profit. However, life is not always smooth sailing, and challenges can arise unexpectedly. Unfortunately, the former owner who had been working with Bernard passes away suddenly, and his equity in the company is inherited by his wife a few years later. She has a strong prejudice against black people and refuses to work with Bernard, offering to buy his shares at a very low price. If he disagrees with her proposal, she threatens to sue him. During that time period, it was common for judges to favor whites over blacks in legal disputes. Bernard refuses to accept this unfair treatment and decides to take the matter to court. However, he needs to find someone who can testify to his business relationship with the old owner. He considers approaching the bank manager, But the manager has already sided with the widow and avoids Bernard. Feeling discouraged, Bernard stands in the bank, looking around at the pristine and orderly building that exudes systemic discrimination simply because of the color of his skin. Whenever he walks into the bank, he is met with disdain. Bernard's mind starts to conceive a bold plan. All 4 banks in the building have shut their doors on him, and he is determined to fight back against discrimination. He decides to buy the building himself and show them that he cannot be silenced. Bernard seeks out Joe, another black real estate developer in Los Angeles, and shares his plan with him. At first, Joe is skeptical, as the land price in downtown LA is exorbitant and no black person has ever owned property there. After some discussion, Joe realizes that Bernard is not delusional but a calculated rationalist. Bernard's plan is to purchase the building because owning it would ensure that the banks inside would serve him. They wouldn't dare refuse him a loan or withhold information about real estate trends, which would make his business dealings much smoother. Joe is initially shocked by the idea, but after considering it, he agrees that it has potential. Bernard realizes that despite his wealth, he still faces discrimination from white people. He believes that if he can acquire property in white-dominated areas, he can gain more financial power. However, due to racial prejudices, he cannot directly negotiate transactions with white people, so he needs a white agent. To fulfill this role, he chooses Matt, who has been helping him with renovations. Matt is an honest man with great potential, but lacks experience. Thus, Bernard and Joe begin to train him comprehensively in areas such as golf, high-class manners, mathematics, and real estate. Matt quickly proves his worth and becomes skilled at golf, able to calculate real estate valuations while playing the game, making him a promising young entrepreneur. At the golf club, Matt has a successful conversation with the owner of the bank building, which was arranged by Joe. Matt is given the opportunity to buy the building, but he doesn't know how to go about it. Bernard steps in and helps Matt with all the preparations before the negotiation. He begins by counting the number of lights on in the building and then calculates the vacancy rate. By using the building's annual revenue and operating costs, Bernard estimates the value of the building. Matt commits these numbers to memory before meeting with the owner. As a result, no matter how much the owner boasts about his property, Matt is always one step ahead and gives out the exact numbers, which leaves the owner and his accountant stunned. They believe they have met a math genius who cannot be fooled. Eventually, Bernard is able to purchase the building, which was initially priced at over $2.4 million, for only $1.56 million. From then on, whenever Bernard enters or exits the building, the president of every bank comes to shake his hand. The little manager who gave him a hard time in the past is surprised. With the support of the banking industry, Bernard and Joe's real estate careers grow rapidly. Single-handedly, they break the strict zoning of Los Angeles's black and white segregation. They pave the way for many young and promising black people to move into white neighborhoods. Several years later in 1963, Bernard returns to Texas to visit his father Britton. After dinner, Britton expresses his pride in Bernard's accomplishments. The next day, while walking around town with his son, they stumble upon the bank where Bernard once worked as a shoe shine boy, when Texas was the most racist place in America. On the following day, Bernard pays a visit to Joe and proposes buying the mainland bank in Texas. Joe initially thinks that Bernard is being unrealistic since Texas is notorious for its severe racism. However, Bernard is able to present compelling reasons for the purchase, eventually convincing Joe to join forces with him. They enlist Matt's help once again, this time as their front man. The trio then meets with the bank owner, Robert Florence Sr. and Jr., to discuss the details of the deal. Although Florence Jr. is suspicious of their motives, Sr. agrees to sell the bank to Matt and his partners. Once they acquire the mainland bank, Bernard immediately sets to work, helping African Americans in town get approved for loans. It appears that Bernard's ultimate goal is to assist his fellow men in securing fair opportunities for housing and financial success. After a period of success, Florence Jr. begins to investigate the loans approved by Bernard's bank. One day, he confronts Matt, Bernard, and Joe about the loans and threatens them with a letter from the U.S. Treasury Department. He informs them that the department will inspect the bank's operations in 1 month. As Florence Jr. departs, the group discusses their options. Matt proposes a solution: they can purchase another bank and transfer the problem loans from mainland to that bank. They consider buying the Bank of Marlin, but Bernard is worried about overseeing the operations. Matt suggests that he should run the new bank. Although Bernard is initially uncomfortable with the idea, he eventually agrees, and let Eunice keep a watchful eye on Matt. In the end, Matt gets to run his own bank, just as he had hoped. The following day, Matt meets with a lawyer to sign loan contracts, but later receives a call from Florence Jr. about clients who want to withdraw their money from mainland. To make things worse, a federal bank examiner arrives at Marlin to assist Matt, and Bernard disguises himself as a janitor to get closer during the meeting. Despite Bernard's efforts, the examiner discovers a critical issue with several loans, and Bernard is shocked that such absurd loans were approved. It turns out that Florence Jr. was behind the issue, as Matt had skipped protocols and used a lawyer recommended by Florence, which allowed him to sneak in the problematic loans. After a while, Bernard and Joe advise Matt that the best course of action would be to cut their losses and abandon the Marlin Bank. However, Matt takes action without informing his partners in an effort to save his bank. The next day, Joe discovers what Matt has done and rushes with Bernard to confront him at Mainland Bank. Florence watches with satisfaction as they argue about the loans. Bernard asks Matt to retrieve their records, but it's too late. Federal bank examiners have arrived to revoke Mainland Bank's license. As they leave the building, Bernard and Joe are apprehended by the FBI. Despite Bernard's resistance, he and Joe are arrested. Later on, they meet with their lawyer and discover that their case has become entangled with racial politics in the country. Meanwhile, Matt seeks advice from Senator McClellan on his options, and that night he makes a phone call. The following day, Matt follows McClellan's suggestions and testifies against his partners during the Senate hearing. Later that same day, Bernard also meets with McClellan and listens to his proposal, which gives him the choice of accepting an immunity deal and confirming Matt's testimonies, or speaking his mind and going to prison. Bernard ultimately chooses to express the sentiments he has harbored for years, and speaks out about racial discrimination in the country. Unfortunately, both Bernard and Joe suffer tremendous losses. After the hearing, the two are sentenced to federal prison. Several years passed, Bernard and Joe were released from prison. Eunice was surprised to see that the two seemed content despite losing their fortunes. Joe then revealed that they owned adjacent properties in the Bahamas. Eunice was shocked and asked how they managed to acquire those properties. It turned out that the night before Matt's testimony, he called Bernard and explained the senator's offer while also apologizing. In return, Bernard asked Matt for a favor before the government seized their assets. The film concludes by revealing that Bernard and Joe's homes in the Bahamas played a crucial role in the fight against housing segregation in LA, and the two still reside next to each other in their mansions. If you enjoy this video, kindly consider subscribing for more contents and turning on notification to stay updated. Your support is appreciated, and leaving a like would be of great help. Thank you for taking the time to watch.